So I had to do two parts of this because the video was too long. So my computer doesn't download, or it maxes out at a certain point. And so we did the second part to that one lecture. We've been talking about qualitative analysis. So thank you for tuning into part two. So let's just keep going. Let me see I think I left off here. And again, just to refresh your memory, what to look for when you are doing this kind of work, or a researcher is looking at these things. A researcher doesn't just make stuff up. They have to actually validate what they're doing. They have to show the work they've done, and it has to be within these certain parameters that we've all accepted in academic world, to ensure that there's reliability in the work, and the work itself is valid and can be replicated. Um, if we had to do this same study again, that's qualitative analysis does that. Quantitative analysis does the same thing. Um, you know, uh, so if you have, let's talk about quantitative a little bit. They speak with numbers. They speak with the language of analyzing things where there could be values to it, sort of error values, and all kinds of little things, percentages that there may be an error. It's not that straightforward with qualitative analysis. Qualitative analysis, you can come up with a lot of different things. It depends on your interpretation of or the researcher's interpretation of the work they're doing. And if it's peer reviewed, okay, they may say yes, this is a valid study. We agree with what's happening, or we don't agree with what's happening. So again, just going back, this one particular example I have here, where they talked about tuberculosis data. A researcher went and had an interview, and this is part of the interview. And when they went back, they wrote it all out, and then they found some words that they were looking for. Now they're looking for words that are going to be impactful to their study, to their research, to the question that they want to have answered. So they highlighted concerned, worried. These are themes right here. So this is you can extrapolate from this little bit of information that there's a cadence, there's a theme going on, and a good researcher would pick that up and say, okay, this is uh, the value of what this data is all about. Let's pick up on this. And you may ask questions that are leading questions. Some questions, if you're doing a semi-structured interview, we talked about that last lecture. If it's semi-structured, you can actually lean towards what they're saying, or go forward with it, um, and ask them to follow up, ask them to clarify something. So a semi-structured interview can get some other rich data that you may not get in a very structured interview. So finding the meaning in language. Sometimes we can learn about a person's perceptions, attitudes, feelings about something by simply noticing the words they use to express themselves. And this could be a cultural difference. There could be a attitude. It could be what part of the country they work in or live in. Their political views, their worldviews. They're, the consideration for a good researcher has you have to put that all into consideration and say, you know what, I have to make sure that I don't miss out on something. Um, I may interview community colleges in the South for workforce development or something. I may ask the same exact questions to the same exact people, not the exact people, but the people in the position in the Northeast college, and they may come up with a completely different answers, or their attitudes may be different, their feelings may be different, and this is an easy one. So you have to figure out what's going on with that person. Try to reflect on the attitudes or behaviors. And the researcher should pick out the words and expressions used frequently in Vitamin interview. I said that already. Again, while you're doing cross-cultural interviews, this is very important. You have to understand what is meant by certain expressions. People may say things that you may not hear in the everyday life vernacular that you're listening, you're used to. There are a lot of differences. It could be, like I said, cultural, regional differences. Make sure you find some meaning in the language that they're coming up with. Um, Watch for the unexpected. I think this is very important when you're doing qualitative analysis. You want to make sure that you don't miss anything that could be that you didn't even think about. It could bring you closer to your answer, or it could bring you to a real sharper viewpoint of the answer you're looking for, or any direction at all. So this is where you learn new things that you might not expect to hear. It's important that you always follow up with a participant that seems to be going to a new direction. You're getting this, and this is what they call rich points. Yeah, and you don't have to know these fancy words. I'm not testing you on any of that, but they're very valuable. These are rich points. You're trying to get rich information because you already have information from your personal experiences, from the literature you have, uh, the expectations that you are looking at. But then somebody may come up with something that you may not have known. Uh, I find this interesting, especially when we're talking to people that are not like you. If you are Hispanic and you're speaking to African American, if you are white and you're speaking to an indigenous person, you may find different ways of their perceptions on things that you might never heard before. Um, and it's important that you keep an open mind and listen to these cues, listen to these things because they may bring some value to your already awesome study. Hearing stories are a way for interviews to communicate the point of ideas or symbols indirectly. Many events, themes, and meaning can come out of a story. It's important to pay close attention to these stories and their meaning. I can go into an interview or a focus group and ask a question, and I can uh, formulate that question um, in a way where I want to hear if there's any war stories that they've had. War stories meaning, um, actual events that they remember and how they resolved something or how they had to handle something. Uh, you can get some good information on that. And somebody else in that focus group said, well, you hear that story as well as you are, and now they're coming out with a rebuttal, or if it were me, I would have done this. Uh, so you may come up with a few different angles to find some really good information and data points. So hearing stories is a good thing, but be careful. Don't go into it too deeply because sometimes stories can go off tangent. Your role as an interviewer or a facilitator or a investigator is to make sure that you give them the room to speak freely. However, keep the keep everything in perspective so that you're not leaving that area with something totally off the wall. Maybe so you got to stay focused on that. And that's my other sticky when I ask questions. When I do a focus group, I always say I write down, stay in the lane, stay in the right lane. So you don't want to go too far off. You get lost. We'll talk a little bit about coding and categorizing idea. We spoke a little bit about coding ideas. This is a sample that I just pulled off the internet where an interview was going on, and this is how they charted their ideas. Again, you got your field notes. You've worked on that. You got your data through audio recording or whatever. You transcribed all that, and here you are looking at areas where you can start to break down all of that work and try to find themes, try to find areas where you can work with or try to move forward. So once you've identified those things that are being used frequently, um, you may be able to see how the interviewee is expressing themselves, what the story is, and try to organize those stories together. There could be a theme that the story was the engagement was a nasty engagement, a customer service disagreement, or something. How do you handle this? It could be anything, and you can get some good information from that. And again, as an investigator, and I like to use the word investigator because you actually, as a researcher, you're actually investigating a lot of the work that's out there. You talk about investigating, you hear that in the justice world, but you're actually doing some investigating. The people who are speaking to you, in research, you say, oh, we're interviewing them. We call them informants sometimes. We use those words very loosely, so it's nothing bad about those words. But the informant is a person who's giving you the information. That's all that is. But again, there's a cultural difference. When I say I want you to be my informant, the person is saying, wait a minute, what are you, a cop? So be careful on how you describe who you are and or describe who you are. You say you're an investigator, and who you think that interviewee is. You're my informant. I just thought that was funny because one of my students had that issue. They thought there were some kind of police thing going on. So anyway, step three: build the overall arching themes to your data. Again, each of the response categories has some themes associated with that to give deeper meaning. And what I want you to see here is this simple image is really just what I need you to put in your brain when you're doing your research. And if you stay with those kind of things, you're like halfway through your work. There's a lot of chatter out there, and you go all over the place. Code your work, categorize your work. By coding, you're uncovering those key points. Categorize your work. You're grouping them together with similar key points and similar themes. And we do this in counseling research a lot. We also do this in juvenile justice research when we're doing qualitative data analysis. And we're finding themes and try to deduce the cause of the customer, whatever it is. Here's his customer. What is the cause of it? So these three basic areas are really the foundational points to keep in mind when you're doing your work. So let's talk a little bit about validity and data analysis. Real quick, validity is the accuracy in which the method of measure what is intended to be measured. How accurate is your treatment or your work? Um, how can you do this where it's valid, where you can actually replicate it over again? You're going to get the same result if you do this somewhere else. You want to validate what's going on. Reliability consists of the research findings. You don't have to. I'm not testing you on any of these words, but it's important that you know these. Excuse me. You know these things because you may find in the research paper, you may find a paragraph that actually says validity, and where the researcher will highlight why they did this research and why it's valid, and reliability. And is it can I replicate this? Can I do this over again? Is this consistent? And the classic model or picture for it is these bullseyes. So you have reliable. Oh yeah, we have a lot in this circle here. Very reliable, but it's not valid. It's not in the center. It's not what's happening. Here you have valid but not reliable. It's kind of all over the place, but not in the center. Here is neither valid or reliable. It's all over the place, but nothing in the center. Now, if you have both valid and reliable information, you're really on target. You have no problem with that. And I hope that gives you a little bit of perspective of what it means to be validity and reliability. I think I have another video. Let me write this down. I think I have another video that actually points that out, and I'll share that with you guys for this week. Validity and reliability. Okay. Now, we're almost at the end here. Hang in there. Testing emergent findings and hypotheses as themes and patterns emerge from your data. It's important you go through the data, make sure you're doing it. Research what any negative instances of the patterns. You may find them, and they're called outliers. And in quantitative analysis, we'll talk about outliers a lot more. I have a great uh, presentation on outliers. I think it's pretty actually funny. It's not easy being funny in statistics or research methods, but I give it a shot. Um, it's often used too easy, and to discard these as it because they don't fit in the pattern. So be careful with those outliers. Don't eliminate them completely, but identify them because you don't want to skew your results or have someone look at your paper. And again, someone who writes this stuff and then peer reviews, if they find out that you left out an outlier meaning something that's not part of that norm, not part of that middle, very far somewhere else. If you left it out on purpose just so your numbers could look good, your data becomes unreliable. I'll go back to that reliability thing. There's a thing called triangulation in validating and confirming your findings. Triangulation really tries to validate your work using different sort of methods or sources to make sure that everything sort of works together. So triangulation might be, you have a sort of your interview questions is one data method, but then you go out and do a survey, that may be another data method, and then you may go and do some observation, which is another data method. If you get those data methods to all conform together, that can give you good validity to your project. And that's kind of called what triangulation is all about. There are different types of triangulation. Triangulation from different sources, again, interview methods, different perspectives, personal journals. Um, there's also the perspective on questions or topics. So that could be different sources triangulation. There's some different methods triangulation, looking at the same question but using different research methods such as surveys. I said that focus groups might be something. So you may do a survey, focus group, and an interview. That will give you some kind of triangulation um, footprint, and that helps with confirming and validating your work. Very important. Let me move my little head here. Triangulation from different researchers. You have two different researchers conducting the same interviews, for example, or interviewing different things. So you're not getting, and I think this is really interesting because if you have two different interviewers, you kind of try to tamper down the personal biases that you may have, the natural skewing from human behavior. So you try to tamper that down by having two different researchers conducting the same interview, and that's a really good method to try to get that done. I know I'm going fast here, and there's a lot of information, so let's just keep moving. And that's just a picture of typical triangulation. You corroborate the findings, or you find some inconsistency from the findings. Uh, Step 5, finding possible and plausible explanations for the findings. So what did you find? So what did you find in your work? You start by making a summary. You ask yourself some questions. Are these findings what you expected based on the literature that's out there? You're validating a lot of literature, or you're refuting something. Were there any major surprises in the findings? How are they similar or different from what's stated in the literature that you went before? And you can find different types of things happening. The literature might be narrowly focused. If you're looking at one certain segment, it could be focused on one certain segment, say young black males, inner city kindergarten. Um, the literature might show a certain um, uh, research dynamic. However, if you went and did the same exact study, the same exact work with a different cohort, you might find something surprisingly different. There may be the way their tests are conducted. I see a lot of times where you see exams or some of these standardized exams where a certain group of people might do very well in it because the wording is the same, the wording is something they're familiar with, but then you give it to a certain group of another people, um, they don't know these words. This is not the same cultural language. They know the words, but they know it in a different way. So so you want to see there may be differences in many of the work you can do. Um, Again, some important sources to answer some of these questions. You go to the literature. You make sure you keep going back to the literature, find out some possible explanations of what's going on. Personal notes, observations, journals. You're paying attention to collecting a lot of information, and you get some key informants and again, the informants again, key informants and community collaborators. You might find somebody who's an expert or an insider that can help you uh, get through the weeds and make sure that you're dealing with this. My dissertation was on community colleges and workforce development. I looked for a lot of information from key informants to help me manage through the wealth of information that's out there. I relied on some professionals who are in the business to help me navigate some of the questions, make sure those questions are appropriate. So again, final slide. What are the implications of the findings? So now what? You found some findings. What did you do? And what actions can you do to make sure that these findings are not just something somebody just throws in the trash can? I read this and chuck it in the trash can. Um, can you help if you found some answers that might change a policy view? You might find some responses to change a technique or a way people are doing things. You may find some answers that say, you know what, this program needs more funding. So how do you do that? You look at the implications of the findings, and you say, okay, if they're not going to give you any more money for this certain program, say you're looking at free meals for kids in kindergarten, what are the implications of not doing it? You're going to see grades go down. So you want to be able to argue the point that giving funding to free breakfast in schools is important. So that's my spiel for this week. I hope I didn't put you to sleep. Um, I was going to give a quiz, but I looked at the quiz. I said, you know what? I'm not here to question whether you memorize something or not. So I'm going to forego on the quiz. You're welcome. And maybe we'll talk a little bit more next time. Maybe I'll put another discussion question to put up there, just to make sure that you guys are participating and doing what you got to do. Let me know what you think about this video. I hope it helps. If there's anything that you want to know more about, please let me know. Email me, and we can have a good discussion. I already got some great emails from folks, who are a little unclear on some things, and I hope I helped them out. And I appreciate you going back and forth. With that, I will leave you and be safe out there, everybody. Make sure you mask up. Take care.